Hello, welcome back to Mountain Gym Card Collectibles. Hope you're having a great Monday. So, we now know who the 2025 NBA champion is, and that would be the OKC Thunder. So, are you excited? It could very well be their first championship trophy, and there's a sense that they could keep winning these championships. That's very possible. And so I'm guessing that there's going to be people chasing down, those players' cards. Anyway, today I want to get into something about sports cards that, I've always kind of had an issue with, and I know the value of, early baseball players, like Honus Wagner. And those cards, like the T206, that was printed from 1909 to 1911 roughly, and there's only about 50 copies in existence. I tend to look at some of these old players' cards as, they're very valuable. But they're almost compulsory in a way, I've sold, some old baseball cards. And, I've owned some, autos, this and that. But, the T206 Honus Wagner card is like the second highest selling baseball card in history. And we'll get more into it, but the thing is that I've noticed is maybe people aren't as excited about it as they used to be. Anyway, what is compulsory? Well, in sports cards, I almost feel like there just are compulsory cards that the hobby expects you to basically bend the knee to and realize their high value. Now, Honus Wagner was one of the first 5 members, inducted into the Major League Baseball Hall of Fame in Cooperstown, as far as I know. So, he is a legendary player. But when you look at when he played, I never really even got to see any film on Honus Wagner. And I know, he's such a big, key player for the MLB. It's just, when you say that name, when you hear that name, what does it mean to you? Are you excited for him as a fan? Like, say, Michael Jordan, or maybe even Barry Bonds, or, a big football star, like, say, Walter Payton or someone. I feel tied to those players. It's just these early baseball players, I'm always having to hit the history books, because I've never really was around during any of their time periods. And like even my dad, who's passed away, he never got to see Honus Wagner play. My dad died an old man. He was born in 1928, but he still never even got to see him play because of just the time period that Honus Wagner played. But when I think of compulsory, compulsory can mean different things, like coercive, required by law or rule, obligatory. When I think of Christians going to church on Sunday, how many of those Christians are compulsory Christians? You know what I mean? Like, they don't want to do it. They're not really interested in Christianity. It's not like they're reading the Bible during the week. But when Sunday comes around, they force themselves, against their own will, for the most part, to go to church. and tell themselves that they're great people. And those are compulsory Christians. Now, during the week, maybe they're the most hateful, abusive type people imaginable, but every Sunday they're compulsory and go to church, all right? And maybe they're even like giving money to homeless people, but they're not happy about doing it. They're just doing it because they feel like they have to. They have to do it as Christians. It's obligatory. And that word, you really start to understand that word compulsory in that sense. And to an extent, I feel like a lot of card collectors go down the same road. It's like they could care less about a Honus Wagner card. But the hobby demands it. It's obligatory. It's almost required by law that you own that Honus Wagner card, which, people like me, they're so rare. I'll never likely ever own one unless I came across one, like a yard sale or bought some stuff. And hey, I lucked out. I found one of the very rarest cards, that was ever printed. But are you happy, about that card? Yeah, it's valuable. Yeah, he's one of the first 5 members to be inducted into the Major League Baseball Hall of Fame. He has, a fairly decent, record for hitting and this and that. He as far as I know, he won 1 World Series. But the issue I have with some of these old cards is, so many people feel like they are valued. But let's face it, even my dad, he was born in 1920, he never got to watch Honus Wagner play, I mean, and, the Flying Dutchman, as that they call him, Honus Wagner, has all these ties, with the Pittsburgh Pirates. And, the Pittsburgh Pirates, were a fairly good team, in the early 20th century. I've always, watched the Pirates, and if you've watched my earlier videos, it's almost like there's a curse, that goes with the Pirates, and what their baseball record is about. I mean, they have Paul Skeens right now, and we all know Paul Skeens is a great player, but he's kind of being cursed by playing at for the Pirates. But, the Flying Dutchman, Honus Wagner, he has a lot of old ties, to the Pirates. And so I was surprised that the Flying Dutchman's card, which second highest, most expensive selling card, recently didn't sell during a Goldin auction. Now, like it says here, 3 other pre-war issues sold for at least $220,000 Saturday night at this auction. But the T206 Connecticut Honus Wagner card offered by Goldin Auctions failed to meet the consignor's reserve price and went unsold in the company's latest vintage card auction. And this is a story from Sports Collectors Daily that just came out yesterday, June 22nd, 2025, because this auction went down just a couple days ago. And this card didn't sell. Like it says, bidding stopped at just over $4 million, with the buyer's premium factored in, which was under the predetermined minimum selling price, which was reached. Let me tell you what, I would have been happy to let this card go for $4 million. I mean, and the reason why is I don't really have a connection to it. I just, as much as I tell myself I'm connected to this card, I remember growing up, as a young kid watching Barry Bonds play with the Pirates. That's the most excited I've ever been for the Pirates, by the way, in my lifetime. But I just, this card And I know they had bidding up to $4 million. I mean, man, but do you feel connected to this card? Or do you just want it because of the value? Because there's only about 50 of these, cards that they believe, that are currently around, So they're very rare. I look at this card, hey, I like it. I'm looking at it right now. I don't necessarily feel like I need to own it to, make me feel like a, big, strong, important sports card collector. I mean, that card has seen better days. we know it's likely not fake. I mean, but this card, looks like it had been crumpled up, Maybe someone was mad, who knows? Crumpled it up at one point in time. But, is this kind of a red flag for the market? Ask yourself that this card didn't sell. I mean, in most people's eyes, this card should have sold. And it being stopped at just over, $4 million. And I believe that the second highest selling card was around $6 or $7 million, for the Honus Wagner. And this is at the T206. Now, like it says here, one of only four graded examples of the rare oversized 1902 W600 Sporting Life cabinet Honus Wagner Type 1 grade PSA 3.5 sold for $292,800. Well, honestly, this is a better card. It's older, comparable to when he first started, because he first started with the Louisville Colonels, in the MLB, and then he, moved to the Pittsburgh Pirates. This is a great card, So that one sold. And then let's see, a 1933 Gaudy Babe Ruth, number 53, graded SGC 8, netted $268,400, which, that'd be an awesome card. I've always felt more of a connection to Babe Ruth than a lot of these older, 1800s, late 1800s, early 1900s players, I just have. And then we have this, this is the modern sports card. This is the beginning of the modern sports card, 1952. Highest selling price in the auction, decades old cards, was a PSA 7 example of the 1952 Topps Mickey Mantle at $292,800. I would rather have that than the Honus Wagner card, the T206, honestly. I'd probably rather have this, honestly, than that T206, The T206 looks like it's just, I don't know, man. It's rough. And then like this one, this Mike Ditka, 1962 Topps rookie card sold for, this is a PSA 9, sold for $207,526. I'd rather have that. I feel more of a connection to Mike Ditka. I mean, I watched how many games with the Chicago Bears, under Coach Mike Ditka. I feel, tied to that. I don't feel as tied to the Mickey Mantle or the Honus Wagner as much as the Mike Ditka. I'd be happier, in my mind, in my lifetime, for what I've been through. I'd be happier with the Mike Ditka rookie card of all these. Why? I am connected to him. I've seen him coach a lot of games. I mean, that's what brought me into collecting cards was the 1985-86 Chicago Bears, team. I mean, that team was just so awesome. And so when they bring this up, the Connecticut Wagner falls short of reserve. Well, maybe they shouldn't have such a high, reserve on this card, I would have had it at, like $3 million, $2 million, $1 million. I'd be happy with any of that, to be honest. But, this is what they consider a key card for the realm of sports card collecting. That's great. But is it a compulsory card? Compulsory as in you don't have any ties to that player at all. I mean, I know he was a coach for a while. I know he helped tutor like Ralph Kiner. A lot of this stuff is just flying off my mind. Now, you can go to Wikipedia, and I recommend going to Wikipedia to read about Honus Wagner because, overall, he is a great player. I mean, you can't say he isn't. And the more that you learn about him, maybe you won't feel, like it's such a mystery, like you're so lost, about that card. Because, I mean, he was born in February 24th, 1874. He passed away December 6th, 1955. That's 20 years before I was born, And then you have to look at his playing career. And this is what I dig into about his playing career is my dad really didn't even have any connections to this man, I mean, my dad watched baseball pretty much his whole life, and that's just because this guy played before his time. You have to look at his time here. MLB debut, July 19th, 1897 for the Louisville Colonels. Last MLB appearance, September 17th, 1917 for the Pittsburgh Pirates, His stats, I mean, his stats aren't like massive, Batting average was .328. He had 3,420 hits in that time period. He had 101 home runs. He had 1,732 RBIs and 723 stolen bases. He was a shortstop. I think he played third baseman as well. But, the more that you read about Honus Wagner, and, like there he is, Louisville Colonels looking very young in 1897. Here he is in 1905. And let's see if they have any like older pictures of him. 1914. There he is in 1940, He still kind of looks like the way he used to, as a young guy to an extent. But, I mean, he's fairly old. I mean, in 15 years after this picture, he passes away. And so I've asked this, too, is how long can some of these cards carry their value? Because you're just running into generation after generation who are a lot like me, It's hard to tie yourself to a card when you have never seen the player play during your lifetime. And I can sit there and, hype this card up all day. This is the best card, the T206, in history, whatever. Second highest selling card in history, blah, 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 blah. But honestly, for those cards that were sold at the Heritage Auction, the Mike Ditka rookie card, I definitely feel like that's the closest, to my time. Even Mickey Mantle, I don't feel close to Mickey Mantle cards. I mean, I know that they are, labeled as the best current collectible card to an extent. But I just never really got to see him play. Maybe if he was coaching or something, I'd feel more tied to him. But I never got that. And so you can show me Mickey Mantle cards all day and night, rookie cards from the 1952. And yeah, they're valuable. Hey, but are they compulsory? Are they compulsory in the sense that the hobby has made them compulsory as these are the most important cards in the hobby, even though you have no ties to these players because of the era that they played with, but the value is just so atrociously high that, people like me, I'll likely never have that 1952 Mickey Mantle. I'll never have a T206, Honus Wagner. I'll never have the 1986 Flair Michael Jordan, which I do feel more tied to definitely than a lot of these other cards, But how long is that going to carry over before you just have people that are a lot younger than these guys, born, way past their time, that are just kind of like me, and you look at the cards and I just don't feel much of a connection to them at all, to where they do feel compulsory, And yeah, they can hype them up. They can put massive values on there. But, maybe that's why the Honus Wagner card didn't get over 4 million, which, $4 million to me, that's a lot of money. I would have let it go. I'd be doing cartwheels, but we don't know what the buyer paid for it. That's just it. Maybe that's what the buyer paid for it. He's trying to sell the thing off. Anyway, how do you feel about, a lot of these expensive, high-valued cards, there's a lot of things about the sports card industry that do feel almost compulsory. And I say, if you don't want to do it, don't do it. If you're not interested, don't act like you're interested. You know what I mean? Don't pretend that you're interested. Or if it's all about the value and you don't care about the player, to an extent, it is compulsory, because the hobby hypes it up, So anyway, how do you feel about these high-end, old baseball cards that you've likely never seen the player play? Are they worth it? Or are they just compulsory? And I talked about that, kind of like compulsory Christians. I'm sure you've met people like that. Yeah, they go to the church every Sunday, but they don't live a Christian life. It's just, Christianity is just compulsory. It's just, they're doing it because they feel like when they die, they're going to get into heaven. You know what I mean? It's just like, and I've run into so many collectors that are kind of walking the same road. You know what I mean? So anyway, if you have any different opinions, leave some comments. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, please subscribe if you're a viewer, just for the fact that I can really start to improve the channel more. And I'd like to thank my subscribers, my recent subscribers. You are the glue that's keeping this channel together. So anyway, I hope you have a great day. I'm out of here. Bye.